Welcome to Piece by Piece, a business podcast by Lumbermens. In this episode, we talk lessons in leadership and customer pain points. Here's Ryan Terpstra, Shawn Montague, and Tank Johnson. Welcome back to another edition of the Piece by Piece podcast. It's a business podcast by Lumbermens, and we are on location today. We're out of our old studio, and we're invading David Tank Johnson's office. Thank you for allowing us to sit in with you, my man. It's great to see you.
Yeah, you too, man. Thank you for having me.
So this is a special podcast, and I'd like to just set the stage before I let you and Shawn take off here. So Shawn and I normally get together on this pod. We talk about different elements of business, leadership, customer relationships, all that good stuff. You are somebody that previously worked under Shawn in building materials. Now you're the main man over in our door division. Got a lot of great experience that we want to dive into. So why don't we start with just kind of like a little first date? Tell us a little bit about yourself and some of your experience that led you to Lumbermens.
Yeah, my journey is very similar to many people. I was in the military prior to getting into retail sales. I did 8 years in the Army and Army National Guard. Got out of the service when I met my wife, and then just kind of started my journey through sales. Worked at corporate America for a big box retailer, went to a manufacturer for wood products, which, you know, that allowed me a lot of lessons around, primarily around new growth. So I left a structured corporate America gig to really start a division that didn't exist. So trying to find new customers, trying to find streamlines where we didn't have a presence. That taught me a lot about myself. And you know, I've known Shawn for many years, and I've always respected him, his drive, his grind. And you know, I'm a firm believer, when you listen to someone long enough, they'll eventually get you to listen and hear, you know, some of the tea leaves. And I made that change. I made that change from the manufacturing world to distribution. And I've been at Lumbermen's now for about just under 4 years.
So Shawn, how'd you meet this guy?
Oh, wow.
And what was your thought process when you ran into Tank for the first time?
I've known Tank for almost 20 years. You know, I was lucky enough to work with him at a retail place that we worked at a long time ago. And I'll never forget that I was interviewing people for a supervisory role that worked on my team. And I thought I had made my mind up. I had went through a bunch of candidates. I interviewed a guy, and I had made my mind up that this was going to be the guy we were going to offer the job to. And then my sales leader at the time pulled me into the office, and he goes, "There's one more guy that you have to meet. You know, before you make this decision, there's one more guy you have to meet. His name is David." And I'm like, David doesn't sound like a good enough name. He's like, "It's really Tank. It's really Tank." And I met Tank, and I interviewed him, and I walked out of that interview, and I said, there is no way we're not offering him the job. He has to work on our team. And that was, like I said, almost 20 years ago. Yeah. And Tank's been a good friend over the years. But wow, you know, being able to share the stage with him here at Lumbermen's, and we work together at a different place as well, you know, it's been a great blessing to have him on our team.
Oh, appreciate that, man. Yeah.
So past all the mushy stuff, let's go back to your experience in the Army. I think that's a really good thing to draw from when we talk about leadership, because, I mean, discipline, following directives, all those good things, I mean, that's drilled into you literally when you're in the armed services. How do you think that's kind of helped you in your career in business, and what kind of lessons do you take from that moving now into the realm that you're in?
That's a great question, and you couldn't have summed it up better, in my opinion, of what the military is. From day one, the military strips down all of the individual personnel that you have in your body. It takes all that to the ground, and they build you up. Maybe one of the best leaders I've ever had was Drill Sergeant Elder. And that's how I got the nickname Tank, by the way.
Okay.
Like, he was the guy who hit me up and said, "Hey, learned a little bit about me, my job, what I was going to go do." And he nicknamed me that, not because of my size, but because of the unit that I was with and my job. And maybe the most passionate person I've ever been around. So if you know me, you know I lead with a lot of energy. I lead with a lot of passion.
I could not tell.
But I say that he led in a way that was just infectious. Not only did he command the best out of you, but he demonstrated it. And I think any leader that asks you to go make a sale or stay late or drive extra to be your best needs to demonstrate that as well. And First Sergeant Elder was everything for me in that space, to the point where I first met him. Like, he's just a massive man, a massive human, and he just, but he commanded the room. And I think you're either running towards leadership or you're running away from it. And for me and him, that really, I wanted to be like him. I wanted to lead with high energy. I wanted to hold myself to a high standard and get the best out of not only myself, but my people.
You guys end up working together at a retail space, and Tank's bringing some things that he's learned from the Army. You guys work together. You move over to Lumbermen's, kind of across the table, really, right? You go from the customer dealer facing side of the table to now a distributor side of the table. What can you take from that experience, moving from one end to the other? And this is a question for both of you, now having seen both sides of, I guess you could say, the business.
I think fundamentally not much changes. We're here to be of service to people. And I think back 20 years ago when, we were trying to sell consumer electronics to people that would walk through the doors, the goal was always the same. I wanted to get to know the needs that you had. I wanted to identify if the solutions that we have fit those needs. And I do that through a lot of questions, a lot of curiosity. I do that through trying to just get to know their pain points. And if the solutions we have match up with the needs that you have, we should talk about that, right? And if they don't, that's okay too. And I think that approach fundamentally has never changed from consumer electronics retail to building materials retail to one-step distribution, which is what I did prior to two-step distribution, and now here at Lumbermen's. I think, we just go to market with that same way.
Couldn't have said it better. I'll even give a different spin to it. The external audience, who you're trying to provide a service to, and then your internal audience. So on our production floor, we have 130 people out there that I rely on and that rely on me. And the environment that we create, how we communicate with them, the messaging overall, and making sure that people see that they have a future. Maybe you just want to pull orders from here until the day you retire. Maybe you aspire to be a leader in the business. Do they see a roadmap, and do they believe in that greater audience? And I think as leaders, we have to make sure we're always pushing to give people the pathway that they want. Doesn't mean they're going to get there, but they need to see a light and a tunnel and a path to get there.
Yeah, I was texting with someone just yesterday something very, very similar, which talked about how important culture is, and how the culture you have is determined by the team that you've created, and they are the ones that are determining the experience that your customers are having.
Yes.
And so, culture is synonymous with customer experience. There's no question. And your team, which you just outlined, is the conduit to that.
That's it. Your best recruiting staff is your staff members.
Yeah.
People bringing other good people to work with you.
So backtracking just a little bit, we've talked about previous experience. You come to Lumbermen's, you're in building materials, you guys are together and working together. And then an opportunity opens in our door division. You're moving over to door. Now, I know building materials misses you, but this is a great opportunity. And there was obviously some things that you needed to do as a new vice president over here. How does your previous experiences that we just talked about, how do you then address these new challenges for business leaders that might have a department they're just opening up, or an acquisition, or something where they're like, hey, this needs more thoughtfulness in 2025? What were your experiences, and how did you meet those challenges?
Yeah, I will say, and I'm not saying this just because it's across the table, but like being under Shawn's leadership for the time that I was extremely helpful. It allowed me to be in the room and hear conversations that were not about us and what we do and what we sell. It was really about the customer. And I think a lot of what we do is really trying to drill down to that. If you can understand the customer's needs and what we do, could it provide a solution? How do we marry that? How do we put those two things together? And, full transparency, didn't know anything about doors, right? Came from a manufacturing background a little bit, but taking that same approach, taking the approach of asking the customer, how are we doing for you? Where are some pain points that we have? What are some things that we do well? And just letting the customer express whatever it may be. And then internally, it's the same thing. It's listening to our people. Hey, tell me how are we doing as an employer for you? And just soliciting that feedback. But never losing sight that we have great people. We have great people who have a lot of knowledge, who can lead us on a pathway that gets us closer to an answer. But ultimately, the customer's going to dictate to a degree, where do we fit?
I think Tank makes such a great point there, because I remember this very vividly. There was a point in my career roughly 10 years ago where a customer said to me, treat me like the customer you want me to be, not the customer that I am. And that sits with me today. And I believe that it is a common blind spot for organizations. And at times it's us, that we think that we know what's best for the relationship, or we think that we know what's most valuable to that particular customer. We don't. We have to ask them. And Tank's approach to our door division is exactly what was necessary. And I'm thrilled, that he had a few good things that he learned in building materials, but ultimately, he still had to come over here and execute, and we still got a long way to go.
Yeah, and plagiarism. I tell it all the time. There are so many things in my playbook that I've taken from other great leaders, and to me, don't let your pride get in the way of that. Take the things that people do well and make it your own. Put a period here, put a comma there. But at the end of the day, building materials has carved out a great roadmap for us to grow and to be something more than just a distributor to a customer.
Yeah, and I'll back that up too and say that, when I arrived here roughly 8 years ago-ish, Lumbermen's has created that path, and I was lucky enough to kind of fall into a great opportunity. And our specialty division, which is our kitchen and bath division, has done such a tremendous job for us over the years that really got us to a point where we were able to grow.
So you guys have talked a lot about the customer, and occasionally we do have pain points. That's been mentioned so far in the podcast, and that's any business. We're going to run into pain points. So you were drawing on past experiences. We see the culture that's been created here. What are some strategies for dealing with pain points? I mean, it's kind of the thing that you don't want to talk about, but everyone does want to talk about, is how do you deal with the difficulties that arise?
I mean, perception at times is reality. So you can't press into the things that you do well and only live in that space. We have to acknowledge that failure exists, but we have to own that. And I think as long as we're moving forward in talking about the areas that we need to improve, it's a great starting point, but also making sure that we don't become a victim of the moment. We can't derail everything that we're doing because of this one thing. We have to acknowledge that. We have to create humility with the customer, and sometimes even with the vendor. And just talk openly around our strategy of how do we fix this? What are the things that we need to do to be better? And oftentimes it's not one person that can fix that. You have to invite everybody into the room to really come up with a solution that sticks.
Yeah, I think that there's the strategy side of dealing with customer pain and the tactical side. The strategic side for us is really making sure that the North Star stays present, which is it's about you, not me. Yeah. That's it. I'd say on the more tactical side of when we deal with customer issues and pain points, and I'll give Tank a shout out because he's really passionate about this a lot in our leadership meetings. Urgency wins, speed wins, and being able to respond fast is super important. Not just in this industry, but I mean, you go back, in our journeys that we've talked a little bit about the last 20 years or so. Urgency wins, speed wins, and it's super important that the customer feels that.
Yeah. Even, and this is something that we talk often about, don't let one transaction determine the relationship. Yes, this is important. We're here to offer a good service to our customer, but don't let this one transaction drive the direction of the ship. It's so important that we acknowledge this issue or this concern, but keep growing that relationship, keep moving it forward.
How have we done that? How have we addressed that? And what's your message to, I think, really the folks on the front lines when it comes to doing that?
Internally, we talk about an on-time delivery schedule, right? So a customer places an order with us, we promise a date, and how often do we hit that? We do celebrate the wins. I mean, we run a pretty high accuracy rate with our schedule. So internally, we celebrate that. But we don't just stay there. We talk about, hey, it's a 98%, a 99% on-time delivery rate. Here's the 1%, here's the 2% that we missed. And then you dig in deeper and you start to understand the makeup of your business. And it's like that 2% impacted this one customer 5 times, 4 times. So it's awareness. And I think as leaders, as operators, we have to know our business, and we can't just live with percentages only. You have to know the percentage and then know what's in the percentage.
Anything building materials wise that resonates with that? I mean, I know we have similar things, especially with the wide breadth of customers across the map, I guess you can say, that we service.
You can't lose sight of what the role of the distributor is in building materials distribution. The role of the distributor in our world are table stakes. You got to have the inventory, you got to get it to me on time, and you got to get it to me safely. You got to get it to me at a relatively fair price in the market. Those are like the table stakes. And we don't get that right 100% of the time. And so there is a team that I'm blessed to have working with us every single day to make sure that those things are happening. And now in 6 different distribution centers.
So everybody has a different strategy when it comes to dealing with customer pain points. How have your influences, we've talked about them in this podcast, how have your influences dictated or made you choose the directive and the direction of how you address customer pain points?
We're putting together a puzzle that doesn't end. There's no end. And everything is a piece of this puzzle. And I think that our I've shared this with our team before. Every interaction we have, every transaction, every opportunity we have is a chance to either disappoint, maintain, or enhance the customer relationship. Everything that happens is one of those 3 things. And we're always focused on that. We're trying to figure out how we handle this situation influences exactly how the customer's going to feel. And I can remember thinking back, what does the saying go? They won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. Yeah. Our customers they feel that. That's absolutely 100% true in this situation too. So.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. It's a never-ending game. we want to be the best, and I'll even take it a step further. People don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to disappoint someone today. People wake up and they want to do a good job. And as a company and as leaders within the company, you want to make sure that you empower them to do that, to be your best, to continue to go forward. And I think as you develop people, as you develop new strategies to become one with your customer, you get those opportunities. Doesn't mean you're going to be right every time, but you have to be right more times than not. And because it's not an ending game, it's something that should drive us every day. It should drive us to want to have a compliment, to want to be able to have a customer emphasize how we impacted their business in a positive way.
Thanks for listening. Join us next time as we dive into the challenges of company growth. This has been Piece by Piece, a business podcast by Lumbermens.